Sweetheart, I've heard that if you like it, you ought to put a ring on it. So how do I know if I should like it and therefore put a ring on it?
You already know, and you've done that. Been there, done that.
Ooh.
But for those who haven't, we have a top 5 today about things that you should look for in a future spouse.
Right. So if you are married, you're married. But if you are dating or engaged, or if you know someone who is dating or engaged, I would encourage you share this with them, because we're about to go through our top 5 things you should be observing about your boyfriend or fiance as you consider whether or not to put a ring
But not a girlfriend,
on
right?
it. What?
You said about your boyfriend or fiance, but what about a girlfriend?
Let's get into that. Before we get into today's episode, just wanted to remind you that in the description of the video below, we put links to all of our social media accounts.
You can always reach us with questions or comments about this episode at marriagebydesignpodcast@gmail.com.
And finally, if you want to support us financially, there is a link to be able to do so at the end of each of the descriptions of our videos. Now, let's get back to the show. All right, boyfriends, girlfriends, fiancés. I am Nathan Warnock.
I'm Andrea Warnock, and you joined us for Marriage Monday on the Marriage by Design podcast. We talked to you on this episode about God's design for marriage, what the Bible has to say about that, and how we live that out practically.
That's right. So today we're going to do a top 5. So the way this is going to work is this is going to be our top 5 things that you should observe about your boyfriend or girlfriend or fiance before you ask them to marry you or agree to marry them, depending on who's asking. And so,
or if you've already been, if you've already put the ring on, maybe before you walk down the aisle.
Right. We're big on putting the brakes on dating and engaged relationships. We have been accused more than one time by dating or engaged couples of whether or not we actually are even for people getting married.
If we like marriage.
Right. And the reason for that is not that we don't like marriage. This is a podcasting channel about marriage. But we believe that once you get married, that's it. Right? So once you say I do, there's no take backsies or undosies or
oops, I crossed my fingers.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
It's once you get married, you're married for the entirety of your natural lives. So we should never rush into that as dating or engaged couples. We need to take that time to really make the most of thinking about, is this person a person that I am willing to commit and serve the rest of my life? Mm-hmm. And so what we want to talk about today is, for Andrea and I, our top 5 things that, and for Andrea, she's going to be talking to the ladies. So ladies, Andrea will be saying top 5 things she would say, watch this in your boyfriend or fiance to determine whether or not you should come under their authority in marriage. And for me, I'm saying, guys, these are the things that you ought to be looking for in your girlfriend or fiance before you ask them to marry you and commit to serving them for the rest of your natural life. So help you God.
Yeah, and this was hard to whittle down to 5 because
sure.
There were quite a few things that I'm like, oh, these are so important. So I might have an honorable mention one that we'll talk about at the end too. Right.
So before we even jump into it, and for me and Andrea, we sort of assumed in this that you're equally yoked, right? So neither of us are going to have on our list like you should make sure they're following God, right? I mean, we're assuming that your boyfriend, girlfriend, or fiance believes the same things about God that you do. So when we talk about being unequally yoked, that's what we're talking about. So,
or doesn't believe the things about the same thing that you don't believe about, the Lord.
Yeah. No, if neither of you believe in the Lord, you're equally yoked.
Right.
If both of you believe in the Lord, you're equally yoked. Probably. If one of you is really passionate and on fire for the Lord and the other's like, I'm just kind of trying to dip my toe in this Christianity thing, then you may not be equally yoked, and you should think about that a little bit more. And we've done episodes on being equally yoked, so I'd encourage you to check those out on our YouTube page or on our website, marriagebydesign.podbean.com. So, but we're assuming equally yoked. Any other assumptions that you made, babe, before we jump into it?
Nope.
Okay, without any further ado, our top 5 things you should be observing about your significant other before you marry them.
Number 5.
All right.
Number
5.
5. My number 5 is, does he have close friends? Something to watch out for. Does he have close friends? Does he cultivate those relationships? Is he himself in those relationships? Does he put a level of importance into those relationships? So I think that's an important thing to watch out for, because somebody who's just all about you and doesn't have that circle of friends, to me, that's a red flag, because we thrive in community. Even people who are very introverted and don't need a whole lot of people, that's okay. They don't have to have a whole gaggle of people that they spend their lives with, but it is necessary, and the Bible calls us to be in community. It's necessary for us to have at least some close friends that we can be very honest with, that can help lift us up in times where we're struggling, that can sometimes push us towards the things that are of the Lord that we don't want to be pushed towards, and call us out, do life with us. So I would say it's really important to have, for your boyfriend or fiance, to have some friends that he surrounds himself with, and that are for marriage and for good things for him, that aren't pulling him down.
Yeah, we may be revisiting that one here in a few minutes. Okay. So we'll talk about that one a little bit more then.
Yeah, it's always concerning when we see couples who are kind of this us against the world. We don't need anybody. Sure. We don't have anybody. That those are almost always things that end in dumpster fires one way or another.
Right. I had a pastor one time say, hey, if you feel like your relationship is romantic because it's like Romeo and Juliet, remember how that story ends.
Right. So that would be number 5 for me.
That's great, babe. That's great. So for me, my number 5 is one that is really born out of us having walked through this, or walked beside couples that have gone through this. And it's this: listen carefully to what she's telling you about what she desires for her future, for future work, for future kids. Listen to everything she says and discount nothing. And here's what I mean by that. Don't fall into the trap of going, well, she says she doesn't want kids, but once she marries me and her biological clock starts ticking, that's going to change. Or, she wants to do this thing I really don't agree with, but once we get married, she's going to change her mind and want to do things the way I do them.
Or the right way.
Right.
Yeah.
Assume that the things she's telling you are the truth and are not going to change. Right? When we go into marriage with assumptions that we're going to change opinions that our spouse has, we're in a really precarious position in marriage. And tragically, we've known couples that she was very clear with him up front when they were dating that she did not want children, and he thought she was going to change her mind down the road, and she didn't. And it wreaked havoc in their marriage because she went, well, I told you this from the beginning, and now it feels like you're not accepting me for who I am. And he went, well, I thought you were going to change that when we got married.
I thought I could change that.
And man, it was really dangerous. Yeah. So observe the things she's telling you and don't discount them with this sort of overly prideful, well, just wait till she's married to me and then we're going to change her mind on this, that, or the other
That's
thing.
great. Yep.
So that's my number 5.
I want to go back to what I was saying. And one thing that I wanted to mention that I didn't is if somebody that you're dating doesn't have friends or very many friends or close friends or whatever, there's probably a reason that person struggles to keep close relationship. And if you are going to be a close relationship in that person's life, there's probably going to be a struggle there in having that relationship.
Yeah, we're going to be revisiting that in a
Great.
few minutes
Okay.
because I completely agree with you. That's our number 5.
Number 4.
Number 4. Do you want to go first this time?
Sure. Yeah, so my number 4 is another practical one. My first 2 are kind of practical ones, and then we get a little bit more spiritual. So my number 4 is observe what does her home living arrangement look like. So, when you're dating or engaged, there's all kinds of living arrangements, right? She lives at home with her parents. She lives with roommates. She lives alone. She lives in an apartment. She lives in a dorm room. Could be a million different things. But I would challenge you, observe what her home living arrangement is like. And specifically, I'm saying, and honestly, this one could go both ways. Does she never pick up her dorm room or her house and you're a real clean freak and you have bought into this idea that, well, once we're married, she's going to realize that that's really important to me that we have a picked up house. Hogwash. She's not. Like we have these things that we bring in. Now, does that mean that over time she may not, sacrifice those things on your behalf? Well, yeah, she might. And if she's walking with the Lord, certainly you're in better footing than if she's not. But the reality of the matter is, so many early marriage woes come from 2 people that have not been living together and have their own flows, their own sort of systems of doing things, and now they're living together, and you go, whoa, I didn't realize like I knew he liked to play video games all night, but I didn't realize that he was going to keep playing video games once we got married. Or, I knew that she just does dinner and then just throws everything in the sink and will wash something when we need it a week from now.
Ew.
But she throws all her stuff in the sink still. This is totally an observation thing. And the same with my number 5 about things that she tells you she desires for her future. If these things are a problem for you, you need to have that conversation right now. Mm-hmm. If she's a slob, or ladies, if he's a slob, you need to love them enough and have the confidence of your convictions to go, hey, why do you always have your mom and dad do your dishes? Why don't you do your dishes? Or, hey, it's going to be really uncomfortable for me to be around a mess when we're married. Is this something that's going to continue to be a thing? But we don't, because we're afraid of the answer. And the answer might be something I can't deal with. But at the end of the day, there's a pride, isn't there? A selfishness involved in that. Because you're just hoping to close your eyes and cover your ears.
Yeah, but you're going to deal with that answer.
Right.
But you're not going to be able to get away from that answer.
That's right. And
we've
known so many couples that have these kinds of just interpersonal issues. And we're like, well, so you didn't know about this coming into marriage? No, I knew. And you knew this was a really big deal for you? Yeah. Why'd you marry him?
Yeah. And for me, let's just say maybe it happened that Nathan was sort of a slob when we were dating.
We're supposed to change names. Schmathan.
Let's say I was dating this guy. His name sounds similar to
Skathan.
Jason. And I was thinking about marrying him.
You dated.
And he was a slob. And I would occasionally clean up his room and his car because it bothered me so much. And, but was never introspective enough to think, is this going to bother me if we ever get married? Is this going to create problems? This is something I should probably address now and decide, is this something I want to deal with for the long haul, you know? So some of it is just
Glad
this
you didn't marry that
rose-colored
guy.
glasses. You right? I'm glad I married you instead.
Oh,
This rose-colored glasses thing of like, oh, I just don't even really acknowledge the problems,
Right.
and I don't even really take the time to think about these things because I'm so in love. So anyway,
Right.
I think it's important to really step back and think about, hey, what are some of these things that drive me crazy right now that maybe I'm not even willing to say drive me crazy,
Right.
but they do, and then I'm going to be locked in a house with that, and
Right.
how's that going to go? So
Right. Yeah. So my number 4: observe her home living arrangement and compare that to what your expectations are once you get married.
great. My number 4 is to observe, kind of like yours work, what his work ethic is like in all things. So is he a guy who works hard and is willing to be diligent in not just what he does for a living, but in his relationships, in his home, taking care of his home,
Yeah.
his finances, all things, whatever he's involved in, does he follow through? Just his work ethic, and hopefully what you're observing is somebody who is willing to work hard and follow through and do the hard things.
It's good.
And even if that means he's working hard but he doesn't make a lot of money, I'm not saying you have to marry somebody who makes a lot of money or who has the potential to make gobs of money or anything like that. It has nothing to do with that. It's just who he is, his integrity as a person, and his willingness to work hard, because marriage, like we've talked about so many times, marriage is hard work. And if he is kind of only wants to put in half effort towards most of the things in life, he's probably only going to put in half effort towards your relationship.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good call. Reminds me of that Jason guy you dated.
I don't know who you're talking about.
Number 3.
Okay, you're up.
Number
for
3.
going first.
Number 3 is how does he fight or disagree or handle conflicts with you and others? So I think this is something that we need to keep in mind in our relationships. And again, not just in terms of, okay, how are we disagreeing in our own relationship, but how does he handle differences of opinion or arguments or whatever with other people, maybe his family members or close friends or bosses or whatever, because probably how he treats those close to him with disagreements is how he's going to treat you. So if he flies off the handle and slams doors and whatever, yikes, you should probably tread carefully, because it's likely that if he's not treating you that way, it's because he's maybe doesn't feel comfortable enough yet, but that may be coming. So, but if he, whatever, we can all get heated when we're frustrated, but if he gets heated but is still respectful most of the time and can come around and try to see the other person's side and is willing to talk about the situation and try to come to a resolution, is somebody who's willing to consider compromise and caring for another person that he's in a disagreement with, even while disagreeing with them. That's all great stuff. So yeah, just think about how does he argue? How does he disagree? How does he handle conflict with all sorts of different people? And if he doesn't do that well at all, if that's scary to you, you should probably take a big step back to really consider how that's going to look in your own relationship.
Yeah, I agree with that. Okay, I'm gonna start my top 3 with a verse because for guys,
Nathan is more spiritual than me. I have no voice, no verses.
So much. It comes from Proverbs 14, verse 1, and it says, "The wisest of women builds her house, but folly with her own hands tears it down." And there are, and I'm going to read them here when I get to my number 1. But a big caution of Solomon's writings in Proverbs and the other of those that wrote Proverbs was avoiding what they call the quarrelsome woman. And so as we think about, should you marry this woman you've been dating or this woman maybe you're even already engaged to, should you go through with the marriage? My caution is you need to observe and ferret out whether she is in fact a quarrelsome woman. And so my number 3 is, how does she respond to the authority in her life? And how does she respect specifically your suggestions or requests? So certainly our wives are not here to do what we tell them to do. That's a misunderstanding of anything having to do with marriage that came from a bunch of misogynists, as far as I can tell, that are just taking Bible passages out of context. But what our wives are called to do is to respect authority. And at least in some form and fashion at times in your marriage, you're going to have to be the authority. And so the question is, how does your girlfriend or fiance handle just general authority in her life? Is this something that she rebels against? Is this something that she intentionally tries to avoid? Or is this something that, she recognizes, hey, there's authorities in my life and I come under those, and I'm going to try and handle those relationships with humility and with submission as unto the Lord? And then specifically, how does she handle requests or suggestions that you have made in your relationship? And there's a couple of them that come specifically to mind. With regards to your family, and requests about going to family holidays as the relationship gets more serious and doing those kinds of things, are those things that she is willing to do with gladness and joy, or is it something that she wants to argue and fight about? And secondarily, with regards to issues of purity, I've known a couple of guys that got in relationships and the guy had set pretty clear purity boundaries, and this particular woman that the woman each of them were dating just kept trying to push those boundaries. And at some point, it was like, hey, if she can't even respect a request to, hey, can you respect what I'm asking you to do with regards to our purity boundaries, very unlikely that she's going to be interested in any sort of looking at you as an authority in her life after you're married. So my number 3 then is just observe, how does she handle the authority in her life? We all have them, right? Bosses, or depending on what your ages are and stage of life you're in, potentially parents, or whatever other authorities within the church. The authorities that she has in her life, how does she respond to them? Is she doing a lot of talking badly about them behind their back? Because that's going to be you once you get married. Or is she respectful and humble with the authority in her life?
Number 2.
Okay, number 2.
Number 2.
Do you want to go, or you want me to go?
Sure. No, I can go. All right. My number 2, and this is the one where it's time to revisit your, I believe, number 5. My number 2 is, who does she surround herself with? And, I find it interesting that you put this as number 5 on your list, and I put it as number 2 on my list, and I think we're both right. Because my opinion, based off of 150 plus couples that we've met with over the last decade is that the wife's friends do way more damage to the marriage than the husband's friends do.
Yeah.
As far as the damage the husband's friends can do to the marriage is not recognizing that the guy is married. So probably can't play golf 5 times a week like we used to before he was married. Probably can't hit the bar 4 times a week like we used to when he was married. You know, I probably can't just drop in at his house any hour of the day or not. Like, these are issues where the husband's going to have to put his foot down and go, hey, I'm not just one of the guys anymore. I'm married.
There's much less slanderous talk.
Exactly right.
From guys about one of their guys' wives or marriage than women with relationships between women.
Totally agree with that. And guys can get there, but by and large, the guy sort of takes it out on the guy. Like, you know, I don't want to hang out anymore. And my guys are like, oh, you're so whipped, right? I mean, it's like, it's a me problem that I don't stand up to my wife, which is pretty easy for most guys to handle that by just going, yeah, I don't know what to tell you. I'm married.
Sure.
But I find in female relationships, this can be a real snake, you know, crumbling the foundation of the marriage, because it becomes, like you said, a lot of, I mean, let's just call it what it is. A lot of what ends up really being gossip about the marriage and about the husband. And I mean, you've shared that you've been in a lot of Christian circles of women that want to talk about issues they're having with their husband. And I'm not talking about, like, if you've got a small group of close, intimate couples where that's a safe space for that, you know, that's fine.
There's a difference. There's a difference, though. When you're coming to your close group of girlfriends who is for your marriage,
right,
and saying, man, we're really struggling. And if your attitude is, I want help in my marriage, which really means help for myself, because none of us can change our spouses, right? If that's, I need help to change myself, our marriage needs help. And so I need prayer. These are the things that are going on. And that's different than, let me just air our dirty laundry and tell you all the things that I dislike about my husband or that are going wrong about my husband, and embarrassing things that he would not want anybody to know about.
Right.
Or, you know, whatever. There's a very big difference between those two.
Right. And I can tell you guys, please do not fall in the delusion of thinking, well, once we're married, she's not going to hang out with those people anymore because she has me. That's silliness, right? I mean, if she's surrounded with people that you know don't like you and are trying to turn your girlfriend or fiance's heart away from you, man, that would be a massive red glaring alarm siren that ought to be going off in your relationship. One
of two things: either because those are not good friends for her, or because maybe you should think about your relationship and maybe it isn't good.
Right.
You know, before you're married, if her girlfriends are saying, this isn't right, you shouldn't be with him, all that, maybe that's something to consider.
Right.
But if they're saying that when you are married, then that's not a good thing.
Yeah, and again, the question is observing who she surrounds herself with. So even though you may go, I don't know what kind of conversations they have, right, but who are they? Like, are these people that have solid marriages that she surrounds herself with? Or, you know, are they drinking buddies? Right? I mean, are these people from, you know, your church that you know have her best at heart? Because if they do, and I can tell you this for sure because I've seen Andrea do it, somebody like Andrea who has, well, even women she may not know very well, has their best interests at heart, and that woman around Andrea goes, you guys are never going to believe what my husband did the other day, or you're never going to believe what an idiot Andrea would be the first one to be like, probably tactfully at first, to be like, hey, let's look at the weather out. This is really great weather, But eventually she would be one to say, you know what? It's not honoring to talk about your husband that way, and I don't want to be any part of that. And she'd walk away if it wasn't that by that point the girl's probably terrified and has changed the subject on her own. But that's something that you do a really good job of. And so the question is that who your future wife is surrounding herself with, or is he surrounding herself with something less than that?
Yeah, that's great stuff.
Good. Okay.
Now my number, what are we on, 2? No,
Number 2.
3?
Number
2?
2.
I don't know. Okay. So looking for, is this guy you're with self-focused or is he others focused?
Ooh, like Jason.
Like Jason. No. How does he pursue to know you well? That's a way that you can kind of ferret out if he's self-focused or others focused. Is he looking for, how do I get to know her and really know who she is? Does he know your love language and try to figure out how to speak that? Does he know what you may be thinking? This sounds really like Nicholas Sparks-ish, but does he know what you may be thinking or feeling in a situation because he's chosen to try to really know who you are?
Right.
Is he, a big one is he preserving the purity in your relationship?
Yep.
Or is he self-focused and
trying to undermine that?
Right.
Yeah.
Because even if you don't hold that in as high of a regard as you should, if he's also dipping to that level of not preserving the purity and, pursuing you in a way that he shouldn't outside of marriage, then he's self-focused.
Yeah.
And not somebody that is going to just change because all of a sudden you're married.
That's right.
So I think it's really important to look for that. And is he, caring for others in the relationships that he has with others as well, and really choosing to not put himself first.
It's great.
And finally, number 1.
Okay, here it is. By the way, shout out to our daughter Ryan, who cut the spoken numbers. I realized this year that if you were listening on audio, if you're watching on YouTube, in the transitions, there's like a number that tells you what number is coming up next and some audio, or music, but on audio, it was just music. So I had our daughter cut in her voice doing the countdown. So
yes.
Shout out to Ryan.
Okay. Number 1. I went against the rules a little bit for number 1. So.
Oh boy.
Number 1 to look out for is his relationship with the Lord. And I don't mean, does he have one? Are you equally yoked? All that sort of thing. I mean, does he pursue the Lord on his own, not as a show for you, not as a way to try to convince you that he is a Christian because he had to be a Christian to marry you? There is a big difference between he has a true relationship with the Lord, and he's made the Lord of his life. And I'm a hobby Christian. I check the box and do the things, and that's all. There's a massive difference between those two people, and that will create a massive difference in the type of marriage that you will have.
Yeah, that's right.
If you have a guy who submits to the lordship of Christ and who understands relationship with the Lord and pursues that is going to change the trajectory of your marriage, and that will create a leader in your marriage that you're going to want to follow. The other of, I'm just doing this to marry her, or I'm just checking the box because that's what we're supposed to do, I don't really pursue relationship with the Lord, all that sort of thing, that man then that if you choose to marry, that ends up leading your family, because regardless of whether he's a good leader you're supposed to be following,
right,
is going to probably lead you in a way that you're not going to want to go, and that the Lord is not going to want your marriage to go, because he's not putting the Lord as number 1 in his life, and he's following selfish ambition, he's following his own thoughts or whatever.
Yep.
And that's going to be a rougher road in marriage. And so it's so important that you're choosing to marry somebody who truly has a relationship with the Lord on his own, without being spurred on by somebody else, without, being kind of pulled along by you or putting on a show or whatever. So that's my number one.
It's good, baby. That's good. For my number one, I'm going to read a couple of verses from Proverb 21, verse 9, and then verse 19. And then I'll say what my number one is. So verse 9 says, "It's better to live in a corner of the housetop than in a house shared with a quarrelsome wife." And then verse 19, as if that wasn't bad enough, says, "It's better to live in a desert land than with a quarrelsome and fretful woman." Man, we know so many couples that have ended up really being in a bad way. Not because the guy's perfect, because he wasn't, but because the wife just wants to fight about everything. And not just with him, but with his parents and her friends and his friends, and just everything is contentious all the time. And so for me, the number one thing you want to be looking for as you consider asking a girl to marry you is her demeanor characterized, not always, but characterized by humility and a desire for peacefulness, or contention and being right. It is so overlooked when guys ask women to marry them about just like, is she a kind-hearted person or not?
Right.
And, guys marry for a lot of reasons, and a ton of guys fail to ask that simple question. Is she as a person characterized by humility and kindness, or is she characterized by wanting to fight and win arguments? Because that's not going to change. It's not going to change once you get married. In fact, the stakes go up once you get married. In fact, and if you're not married, you're not even really a threat yet as far as Satan is concerned. So even if she's not quarrelsome going into marriage, this is going to be something she's going to have to deal with in marriage. And so if she's quarrelsome and contentious, wanting to fight, wanting to be right all the time, going into marriage, man, buckle up, because that's going to be 100-fold worse once you get married. So, man, be real about whether she's a lover or a fighter.
Good. That's good. And a good indicator of this is when she does have disagreements with other people, is she willing to then, in her own time, work through the hurts that she feels and the bitternesses and all that sort of thing, and forgive that person and give those to the Lord? Or does she hold on to those and let those things bubble up in her and create more anger within her that she can, in her mind, use against the other person? That's really great.
Yeah, and I found it really interesting. As guys, we can be actually attracted to these type of people because when you're dating and engaged, you're the one that she's coming to complain about all these other people about, and you feel like, oh yeah, I'm her refuge to complain about every other person in her life. And then you get married, and then you are the person that she's complaining to other people about. So, man, if you're considering someone who's a contentious woman, I would caution you to think really long and hard about whether or not you're willing to commit to that.
Great.
Okay, you had an honorable mention.
I do.
You want to throw that out there before we close it down?
Yeah, it's how he treats his mom and other women in his life.
Your mom?
Oh my God, that's offensive. So just thinking about, how does he treat the women in his life? Right. And is he respectful towards them? Does he consider them, because probably that's going to be an indicator of how he's going to treat you.
Yeah, it's good.
And so I think watching out for that is a good thing.
It's great. Really good. Good. Well, I hope you guys found something on this that you could sort of latch onto. I would love to hear what would you put on your top 5 for things that we ought to be considering before marriage? Love to have you put those in the comments below. If you're listening on audio only, love to have you go over to our website, marriagebydesign.podbean.com, and leave a comment under this video. Guys, thanks so much for joining us. As always, we'll be back next week with more content taking a look at God's design for marriage. Until then, remember, God is for your marriage. Have a great week.